Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have 5 novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. You have joined us on a very special day, an important day in history. And I want to introduce you to the person that's going to tell you all about it. I didn't know. Her name is Jann Alexander. Hey, Jann.
Hi, it's great to be here today.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you're going to tell us about this important historical moment and how your writing is connected to that.
Okay,
So,
great.
Jan, she has this remarkable book coming out in July. But the reason we're posting today is because of during the horrific Dust Bowl in 1935 on this day, April 14th, this is the 90th anniversary of what they called Black Sunday. So, Jan, let's start there. Tell us about what was Black Sunday? What was that?
Wow, great question because so many people I talk to about this don't really understand the significance of it. And Black Sunday was probably the ultimate dust storm of about 5 years of dust storms that people in the Plains states had endured. And this encompassed parts of New Mexico, Colorado, big chunk of West Texas and the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, even into Kansas. And Black Sunday was the day when a gorgeous day, otherwise nice and sunny, unexpectedly nice, a sudden, huge, the biggest, blackest, baddest dust storm of all appeared on the horizon and just overtook entire towns for a long period of time. And it was just midnight black, like you just couldn't see anything. And dust storm actually was really dirt that was flying through the air, through the atmosphere. And it was dirt that was let loose because it was loose soil after years of drought and farming practices and bad soil conservation that just made all of the earth loose and ready to fly. And
Provoking
so my
people
book
that,
opens that day. Hmm.
oh my gosh, yeah. So the book and it's called Unspoken. And here's the description. A farm devastated, a dream destroyed, family scattered, and one Texas girl determined to salvage the wreckage. So it opens on this. I love that description. It opens on this historic day. Tell us the premise of the story.
Well, that one girl that was determined to salvage the wreckage is Ruby Lee Becker. And she has grown up through years and years of dust storms, drought, and let's not forget this was also the Great Depression. And only to come of age and find her family has died, has been lost, has been scattered, and she desperately wants the thing she cannot have, which is her home and her family back. And the story takes place with Ruby coming of age, determined. She's more tenacious than fire ants. And if you've ever lived in Texas, you know what those are. She is determined to reunite her family and rebuild their home.
Wow. We have fire ants in Florida too, so I do know
Oh, okay.
how determined fire ants are to eat you when you
I'm
step
very
on their
sorry to hear
homes.
that. I'll never relocate to Florida knowing that.
So, well, what led you to this story? What led you to want to lift this moment in history and then create this wonderful, remarkable novel?
Well, it was a very slow build for me because my previous career before I started writing, I was living in the DC area as an art director. But uh, in about 1976, I think it was, a film came out that just got grabbed my soul, and I have never forgotten it. And it was called Bound for Glory. And it's a story of Woody Guthrie, who did indeed live through this Black Sunday dust storm.
Mm.
And the way it's evoked in the film is just unforgettable if you've ever seen it. And so it just stayed on my mind for the longest time. And whenever I could learn anything about this period of time, I did. And I became kind of a collector of things from the 30s and 40s and the whole lifestyle and the vintage things that went with that. And I just kind of became immersed in it. And then when I began writing, um, I had originally written another novel before this one, but it was set in this same town, and I knew this history, and it just nagged at me to say, to speak this truth of what had happened to people in during the Dust Bowl. So the really the whole story kind of just came to me once again after this long, long point of simmering away, but just came to me kind of in a way inspired by the fact that my mother-in-law came from a Texas family with very fun, rich names like Ruby and Pearl and Ida. And, I just could immediately begin to picture these people. And so, a few little bits of inspiration there. And then one day I just woke up and had my entire first paragraph, which really has never changed. And that's how I launched the book.
Wow, wow. How long did it take you to once you decided to stop simmering and to really get down to
Well,
following up that first paragraph? How long did it take you to write the book?
it took a good, well, that happened in about 2015. So it's been about 10 years with other things going on intermittently. But once I decided to write it, I needed to immerse myself in research. And I know you know about historical research because you have a novel that's historical fiction. And so the lure of historical research is great.
Yes, it
Sometimes you
is.
just can't look away.
The rabbit holes that we can get into.
I know, but I refuse to call them rabbit holes because I think they all become useful at some point in some way. And
Yes,
so I
yes.
save them all. I have a big database and I archive everything. And but anyway, I just think that it's just as well that I did all this research. I wouldn't have really understood what the plot developments needed to be without really understanding some of the events and the of the time and how people
Yeah.
lived or didn't live.
Have you read Four Winds by Kristen Hanna?
I have, and of course I've read The Grapes of Wrath. But
Yes, yes.
my so everybody's really familiar with Dust Bowl um, refugees because that's really who they were. They became
Mm.
homeless in their own land, and they had to migrate elsewhere. And everybody's familiar with the ones who went to California, called the Okies, even though most of them were not from Oklahoma. They were kind of from all over the Plain States. But those novels have always kind of told the story of people who left. And in my book, I didn't want to tell that story. I wanted to tell about the people who might have stayed, perhaps foolishly, perhaps not. The reader can judge. But it's, that very tenacity of wanting to stick on the land that they believed in. And it was kind of a funny feeling that farmers had back then that the rain will come. The rain will follow the plow, and when it rains, it'll all be better. And they kind of had this wish: when it rains, it'll all be better. It's kind of like us today thinking, well, when I win the lottery, it'll all be better, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes, and that climate change is not really anything, and it's going to go away.
all right, no, it's not. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, there was I just happened to see in the news the winds were so high and so
Yes.
bad in this part of Texas that they were warning people to stay away from their first floor windows and stay inside. And people with breathing conditions should not be exposed, et cetera, et cetera. So,
It was eerie, wasn't it?
yeah.
That was an eerie
Uh-huh.
reminding us of this time and the importance of your book in so many ways. So you mentioned a little bit about Ruby Lee, about, that she has, she's has the tenacity and determination of fire ants. Tell us a little bit more about her character and what kind of person she is, and what do you really like about her, and what kind of does she need to fix? Those we're never all one thing. So tell us a little bit about Ruby Lee.
Exactly. Well, Ruby, she's 10 when the book opens, but she pretty quickly matures. And she has a grave sense that she carries, her big wounds that she carries as being abandoned, that she feels that she's been abandoned by her family. And without doing spoilers, I don't want to say too much more,
Yeah.
but that is really her biggest wound, and thus she really hides. She protects her heart very carefully, and she puts on that
Mhm.
very as a young teenager. She puts on a shell around herself to kind of prevent people from getting close to her. Just by being an angry, acting out kind of individual, which I'm sure we can all relate to. We all have seen that happen. And
Raised one.
okay, perfect. And so, but as she gets older, she begins, and she really has more the agency, I guess, to follow through on her quest to find her family and find out why she's been abandoned. Except that's the thing she doesn't really want to find out. She fears that. Um, and so she's incredibly determined. And what I like about her, what I tried to write her as, and I think she turned out this way, is she's incredibly resourceful. If one door shuts, she figures out a way to bust through another one. She just doesn't ever give up. And so, but she becomes, of course, like many people like that, she becomes a little misguided about some ideas. And uh, she's smart as a whip, but she can she can delude herself about her own self. So
Yeah.
her big challenge will be to become vulnerable and to a little bit, and to be able to accept that other people care for her and love her, and that's kind of the essence of how you create a family if you've lost your family. So that's what she has to
Yeah.
learn to do.
Wow. Sounds powerful. She sounds amazing. Uh, one of the things you mentioned, research earlier, and how they're all jewels that we have to hold on to because we never know when we're going to need them, and it helps us understand the era that we're writing about. Is there
Uh-huh.
anything in your research that really just surprised you or knocked your socks off or delighted you? Did you find something interesting in your research that might surprise our audience?
I had a few of all of those.
Okay,
um,
cool.
So one of the big surprises was, and it gave me a great plot development, is learning about state homes for neglected independent children in Texas. And see, this is a thing I'd never heard of. And luckily, its time has passed. But there were such places not just in Texas, but all over the country. And they started off well intentioned enough. They weren't for orphans. They weren't orphanages, and they weren't there for people to come and adopt the children. They were there for children who had either been neglected, abandoned, or during the Great Depression, it was not uncommon for parents who were down on their luck, as they would say, to drive up and drop their children off and say, "We'll come back for you, when we get a job." Or nobody had a job back then,
Hmm.
when dad comes home, when dad finds work, or when we can make a crop again. Any number of reasons. And sometimes they were reasons of, just other neglects that people had, either mental illness or maybe drug use wasn't a big deal back then, but alcoholism certainly was.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but the notion of children being raised in a home waiting for their parents to come back and not knowing if they ever would, to me was heartbreaking. And of course, those kinds of institutions aren't the kind of place where you get terrific parental role modeling or loving or caring. and they're ripe for all kinds of abuses. So that was
So that
one of
was
the
one of the
biggest
biggest.
surprises that I had when I unearthed all that.
It's interesting you say that, Jan, because um, in some ways our current foster care system is filled with children waiting for mom and dad to
Uh-huh.
come back and get me, to rescue me. There are 400, on any given day in America, 400,000 children are in foster care, and only about 50% of them are available for adoption. The other are just, like you said, they're just
They're in a
waiting.
holding, yeah, holding
They're
pattern.
waiting
Hmm.
and hoping dad and mom will come. Somebody will come for me, grandma, somebody. And it is heartbreaking. And 62,000 a year age out of the system with nobody claiming them. So you're talking about 1930s, and here we are, 2025,
Hmm.
and we're not doing a lot better. So tell us something happy that you found. Or something just kind of cool that you
Okay.
found.
Okay, because the
Yeah,
other
give us
things
a
were,
little here because we're
I know.
quiet.
And all the other things, a lot of the things I found were disturbing also. But one happy thing for me anyway is that someone who was very much a hero of an American hero of that era, extraordinarily well known, beloved, and also my personal icon, although long gone now. Uh, whose name I'm not going to give you. It turned out that as I was researching, it turned out that she spent some time in Texas. And so naturally, that left an opening for Ruby to intersect in some way. And so that was one of my happier
Cool.
moments when I had
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Because Ruby desperately needed some role models and some mentors, So
Yeah. So you found her somebody's.
I found her several somebodies, but this is the big one. So
Yeah.
and I really love trying to like make the actual things happen, land on the actual dates that they happen. The things I write about,
Mm.
I don't want to cheat them a day or two. I don't want to cheat them like a year or 3 years. I want them to actually, like, if you went and looked it up, you'd find out that was exactly what happened then. So that was what was
Wow.
the happy coincidence for me.
I like that too. I like it that you're true to the dates, true to the what was going on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the beauties about historical fiction. A woman asked me, I was at a book club yesterday, and a reader asked me if I felt badly that I didn't stick to all the facts of my grandmother's life, who inspired True Grace. And she said, do you feel like you lied or that you, and I said, no, I'm a fiction writer. I said, I do try to, things that historically happened. I try to make sure
Uh-huh.
that's accurate, but I make stuff up. That's my job. It's a strange question. I think she's going to like your book. So are you working on something? Well, first of all, let's tell everybody when Unspoken is coming out. This is the reason we're doing this today and not closer to the July date is because this is such an important day in history. But when can I actually read Unspoken?
Well, thank you for asking. You can read it on July 3rd, but you can pre-order it right now, which I'd love if everyone did. Um, but yeah, July 3rd, and I'm going to be having an online launch party and in a book club format for it on that very day, July 3rd, at 2 p.m. And if your viewers want to come, they are so welcome.
That's wonderful. Party. Who doesn't want to come to a book party? I love
Right,
that. That sounds
exactly.
wonderful. Are you working on anything new now?
I am because I first began to think of this as a series. I realized I had a story to tell that uh, it originally began at like 230,000 words, which, as you know, I mean, viewers might not know this, but as you know, that's at least twice as long as a book can be in this world. And so, because of that, and I carved out, a whole character and a whole other scenario, that is the next book in the series that I'm getting ready to go. But I also have a novel that's in consideration right now with my publisher, and hopefully they'll decide to publish it. It's part of the same series. It's set in the same town, which is a mythical town,
Mhm.
but based on reality, kind of, of the geography and everything. And it is called Vacancy. And so if they decide to publish that, that will come next. And then I've got several other sequels in mind already for Ruby and her uh, various family members, acquaintances, etc. But they're just in draft form. So
That's wonderful. That sounds like you're
the
very, very busy. This is awesome.
yeah, the Dust series will go on and on and on longer than anyone uh, can remember, and the author is like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Who knows?
We just keep going. We keep
I know.
going.
I know.
Um, so, was there somebody in your reading life that had a big impact on the way you write, on your life, and just a big impact on you personally?
Well, I have to say, in thinking about this recently, that the idea of writing historical fiction, um, I think of it as a more recent idea that I had because I became real engaged with historical fiction as an adult. But
Mm,
when I think back about what I loved doing in high school, when I was in high school, was reading basically historical fiction. Fiction. Every great classic that we had to read
yes.
was historical fiction. And so we all got an early education in it, and hopefully it stuck that people love it. But um, I think that what really influenced me in terms of one author, and you'll laugh when I say this, but it was Ernest Hemingway, because I was in 10th grade and we were tasked with studying the Lost Generation and the authors of the Lost Generation. And I just really fell in love with Hemingway and his writing. And then later on, as an author myself, I've often decided that Hemingway's rules were really not anything I could adhere to because I can't throw away adverbs like that. Adverbs and adjectives, I like them. So I'm not quite as spare. But more recently, when
Yeah.
I started writing and I lived in Texas, and I haven't lived in Texas, I'm not a native here. I
Mm.
lived elsewhere for until about 20 years ago. And when I started reading Texas authors, I really gravitated towards their voice, like Paulette Giles, um, who you probably know her from News of the World, which became
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
movie as well. But she's just a wonderful author, and then a lot of other great Texas authors, and they've all influenced me a lot.
Yeah. That's okay. And is there, and I wouldn't laugh at Ernest Hemingway, you know.
Uh-huh.
One of the people that influenced me the most was William Shakespeare. So hey,
But you don't
I'm
write
a
Shakespearean, do you?
I'm a Shakespeare nut. You know what I did? I learned a lot from him. I learned how important the mixture of action and um, love, and he had to put on plays that the people sitting in the pit wouldn't throw tomatoes at him. So there had to always be
Uh-huh.
things going on, and so and he really tells it, that 5 acts, that perfect arc of a story. I learned tons from him. He and I are buds. So, is there anything that you read recently that you could recommend to our audience?
Well, recently I became aware of a kind of an eye-opening woman in history that I'd never heard of. I know how embarrassing, but Mary Wollstonecraft, who I became aware of because Nancy, Nancy, her name will come to me. She wrote a biography, a historical biography of it, and that I read. Nancy Mastro is her name. And I loved that book. So then I went on to read another one about the same figure in history. And she was basically the mother of Mary Wollstonecraft was the mother of feminism in 1792. And
Wow.
so she was writing and publishing these incredible treatises for about women's rights back then. That's why she's considered the mother of feminism. So then I read another one called Love and Fury, which is another historical fiction account of her life, and I just really love that. So and I've got a lot of TBR such as True Grace on my list. Um,
Yes, those are great. Those were great recommendations. Thank you, thank you. So now, everybody, it's in pre-order, Unspoken by Jan Alexander. You can go on any place that you buy your books. You can go and pre-order it. And also, you could let your library know that you'd like it to come in, that you'd like it to be available when it comes out on July 3rd. 3rd? Yes, July 3rd.
mhm.
Uh, and so now they know how they can pre-order your book, but how can they find out more about you? How can they see what, activities are happening, find out more about your launch party? How can they find out all of that?
Well, the easiest thing to do is just go to my website, which is jannalexander.com, and there are two N's in Jann. So Jann Alexander.com. And I am on social media, but a different little username. And it's at JannAlexTX. So most social accounts, you'll find me there. Um, and I have a mailing list for my newsletter where re, basically it's about every month I send out cheery little news about historical tidbits and all things related to creative activities, art, photography, reading, reviews. And so those are three great ways to get in touch. And it's all on my
Excellent.
website.
I was just going to say, and they can go, the one-stop shopping is to go to her
Is the
website, and that'll
website.
get you to all the other places. You can also
Mm-hmm.
sign up there. And I hope that you'll put in the notes that you met her on what are you reading? What are you writing? I hope you all have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye.